Here's a question I reckon everyone's asking. What's life all about? Some people are asking it out loud, others are asking it more subconsciously, but everyone's asking the question. The philosopher Plato was right when he said, humanity is a being in search of meaning. Everyone wants to know, what is life all about? The fact of the matter is, though, that unless we can get in touch with God, speak to Him, or perhaps more importantly, have Him speak to us, the answers that we get to those questions are only ever going to be our best guess. The wonderful truth at the heart of the Christian message is, though, that God is a God who loves to speak. In fact, it's right at the heart of who He is and what He's like. He's been speaking since before time. Jesus gives us a little glimpse of this. In John 8 and John 12 and John 17, he speaks of how he's been given words by the Father. If you can imagine it, he and the Father and the Son have been in conversation since before time began. Speaking is right at the heart of who God is and what He's like. In fact, so integral is speaking to God that Jesus, the second person of the Trinity, the Son, is in John's Gospel referred to as the Word. The Word became flesh and made His dwelling among us. You see, God is at heart a speaking God, a God who loves to reveal Himself to us and to relate to us. He's been doing it since before time began, but He was also doing it at the moment time began. So if you remember back to Genesis chapter 1 verse 3, right back at the beginning of the Bible, it says there, God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God brought the whole creation into being by speaking. But not only did He speak in order to create the world, but He also created a world that speaks. So Psalm 19 verse 1, for example, says, "The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the works of His hands." It's saying that you can look at a mountain view with the sun setting over it, and it will be screaming at you that there's a God and telling you what He's like. Or you could look at the cell structure of a blade of grass, and it would be doing the same thing, proclaiming who God is and what He's like. The fact of the matter is, though, that we're like small children with our fingers in our ears. We don't want to hear what God has to say. Romans chapter 1 says that we suppress the truth about God. We refuse to listen to Him. We turn our backs on Him and walk away. But that doesn't stop God from speaking. In fact, if anything, it just gives Him more opportunity to speak about Himself and what He's like. He speaks about Himself in creation, and then He begins to speak about Himself in salvation. And He does it in the Bible by making promises, covenant promises. He starts with Noah, first of all, making promises to him, then to Abraham, then to Moses and the people of Israel, and then to the great King David. And each time those promises reveal something to us about God and what He's like, and they act like little sparks that ignite a whole series of events which themselves in turn reveal God and speak to us of who He is. All of those old covenant promises then find their fulfillment in the new covenant promises found in places like Jeremiah and Isaiah and Ezekiel. And those new covenant promises then find their fulfillments in the person of Jesus Christ. He says Himself in John chapter 5 or Luke chapter 24 that the whole Bible has been pointing towards Him. He's the grand climax of the story. He's the fulfillment of the story. He is everything God wants to say about Himself. The Word became flesh. The book of Hebrews in chapter 1 verse 1 says this, "Long ago, at many times and in many ways, God spoke to our fathers by the prophets. But in these last days, He has spoken to us by His Son." As a friend of mine says, Jesus is God introducing Himself. So when we come to God with that question, what's life all about? He replies with a very simple and yet deeply profound answer. He says, Jesus. Now, all of that, of course, leaves us with a bit of a problem. How do we, as 21st century people, come to hear about a first century person? We'll think more about that in the next video.